Hello, everybody. Today is Tuesday, August 10th. You are at the Kubernetes SIG Testing bi-weekly meeting. I am your host, Aaron of SIG Beard, also known as Aaron Kirkenberger, also known as SpiffXB at all of the places. During this meeting, we are all going to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct by being our very best selves to ourselves and each other. If you have a problem with the conduct of this meeting, you are free to reach out to myself on Slack or all the places, or you can reach out to conduct@kubernetes.io. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted publicly to YouTube later, so you can watch us be our very best selves. On today's agenda, I wanted to talk a little bit about stuff we've accomplished during the last release cycle. I'm going to hand over to, after that, we're going to have Yuvraj talk to us about granular approval support for the approval plugin. And then I thought we could use the remainder of the time to talk about what plans we have as a SIG or as individual contributors for the 123 release cycle of Kubernetes. So with that, let me find the doc where I was scraping random stuff. So I can put it all in here. Hey, so I'm bad at celebrating accomplishments. I'll just say that up front. Like I think one of the wonderful things about the Kubernetes community is that we have the shout outs channel where people can shout out folks who do awesome stuff or go above and beyond. And I aspire to get back to that level. But it's been difficult for me to do so because in the old days, I used to have just visibility kind of on all of the PRs that were flowing into the test info repo. And so I could kind of keep track of what everybody was doing. The amount of PRs I have to watch has grown significantly, and it's also a number of issues, and it's a number of different repos and stuff. So if y'all notice stuff that seems really cool or you're really excited has landed, please feel free to like shout it out, call it out in the SIG testing channel, call it out in the shout outs channel, you know, bring it up in this meeting here, because I think there's a lot of great work that happens. But the challenge for me as a chair is that a lot of the work happens as a pull request with no issue associated with it whatsoever. And the volume of pull requests that hit test infra is pretty large, and a lot of them are job config changes. It takes me a long time to kind of sift through what is a job config change, what is a prow change that's really helpful to somebody who runs prow on a project that isn't Kubernetes, and what is something that's actually been done to improve the experience of contributing to the Kubernetes project, especially when it comes to making sense of our tests, running our tests better, or making the test results more actionable. So I'll give you my hot take, which I just dumped in the meeting notes, but I can share my screen so it's not just my face the whole time that I'm talking. Let's see. So I tried to just bucket things that were in the 122 milestone. And I did this by kind of taking a look at the SIG testing board. As a refresher, this SIG testing board covers all of the issues that exist over the Kubernetes organization. So we are missing things from Kubernetes SIGs here unless they're added as a note, as Amit did here for some kubetest 2 stuff. We do have a separate board for Kubernetes SIGs. I just don't have that link quite as available. And then in this board, we try to keep a healthy column of things that are of issues that anybody can work on. They're help wanted. We try to tee them up. We try to make sure they're relevant. Things that we plan on working on, things that are in flight, things that are blocked, and then things that are done. And so then I clicked on the filter box, and I filtered to everything that was in the 122 milestone. And I came up with, there are only 14 issues on this board for the 122 milestones. I feel like maybe I did a bad job of triaging things onto this board or milestoning them appropriately. was going through and trying to like clean up this and reconcile a little bit this morning, but as some of you may be aware, GitHub appears to be having some fun issues today, so I couldn't quite add milestones without getting a bunch of errors thrown at me. But if I look at this list, the top issues right away are all kind of related to our companion working group, the Kate's Infra working group, which is all about migrating the project's infrastructure over to a place that the community is empowered to manage on its own, such that the community is self-sustaining. And probably the biggest lift that we pulled off this release cycle was to make sure that all of the CI builds of Kubernetes live someplace that is community managed. So no longer do we rely on google.com to host either the binaries or the container images that are produced by Kubernetes, which is huge. I sent out a mailing list message to Kubernetes dev trying to thank everybody who was involved there. So thank you to everybody who helped that out. I've started looking into migrating our metrics pipeline over to Kate's Infra. So if I click on this issue, let's see, I do it the way that doesn't leave me on the board. Basically, like this file is a super useful file if you want to figure out like what are the flakiest jobs that exist in Kubernetes, and then within those jobs, what are the tests that are flaking the most. And the way we generate this file is we run a gigantic SQL query against a BigQuery data set. And that BigQuery data set is populated by a tool called Kettle. And then from those queries, we get a bunch of JSON, and then we pass that through JQ, and you end up with something that looks like this. I know a bunch of JSON in text format is not necessarily the most friendly way of doing things. I think there's an issue somewhere. If somebody's interested in pulling this into like more of a friendly front end, that could be filtered or drilled down or clicked. But this is really useful. So I can say, for example, the integration tests seem to be not super consistent. Consistency here is basically a proxy for flakiness. It's how often it passes and fails for the same commit. And apparently the test exec plugin rotation via informer test is the flakiest by far out of all of these tests in the integration test job. So if somebody wanted to go fix this test, figure out why it's flaking, they would have the highest impact for the jobs that we care about that are merge blocking Kubernetes. But this file is kind of large because it's flakiness for every single job that we run, not just the ones that are merge blocking, not just the ones that are release blocking, but all of them. So it could be useful for the whole project. But when it comes time to like burn down for the release, and we've got those dedicated flake hunters who really want to like figure out why things are moving so slowly, it's always about figuring out what's in here, figuring out why it's flaking, and getting rid of it. So this lives in a bucket called Kate Metrics. And this bucket now lives in the Kubernetes.io GCP organization instead of the google.com organization. I just wanted to call attention to that because that's the first time we tried migrating something without like migrating to a brand new bucket name. And this was in the interest of people toss this URL around all the time, and it's linked in a number of issues. And I wanted to make sure that it wasn't a dead link. And it is a bucket that is not written to a lot. And it's not necessarily a super high impact, super critical bucket. So I wanted to try playing the dance of you can delete the bucket and then immediately create a bucket of the same name someplace else. And so we tried that dance out, and it seems to have worked just fine. Other parts of this pipeline would involve Kettle, the thing that actually writes to BigQuery. The BigQuery data itself, which lives in a project called Kate's Kubernetes. Triage, another tool which ends up querying that same data set. And I think that's everything. So I think that was a good first step for 122, and maybe we can do that in 123. Let's see. So I think this is something I set up, but Arno definitely helped extend it. So as you're familiar, Prow has auto bump jobs that just sort of automatically bump all of the prow component images to the latest image that's available in staging repos. What this is about is doing the same thing, but for the prow build clusters that live over in the community-owned infrastructure area. So instances of Boscos and GH proxy are automatically bumped via PR. We currently don't have it doing the same thing that we do for prow.k8s.io these days. Prow.k8s.io now has PRs that are automatically opened up and basically automatically merged. There's no human review in that loop. We're still being a little cautious and having humans review these PRs. And then Arnaud recently extended this auto bump job to not just bump the build clusters, but also bump the K8s Infra Prow instance that he's been standing up over in the excuse me, AAA cluster over in K8s Infra. I'm talking a lot. I'm going to move a little more quickly. Let's see. There were a number of generic prow quality of life things that happened, which I thought were really cool. They were kind of unsolicited and unprompted, which is nice. One of them really only matters to folks like myself or folks who are interested in trying to script or generate reports about what's going on with our prow jobs. This label here, prow.k8s.io.base ref label, is what I can use to take a look at a pod and understand when it has a name called like poll Kubernetes unit or something. I don't know which branch that's running against. I do know which branch that's running against if I look at the prow job CRD, but eventually those prow job CRDs go away. And I lose track of this in things like our metrics that are exposed via cloud monitoring. So, GKE ends up shoving stuff over to a Google Cloud monitoring thing. And so I get all sorts of nifty metrics about pods, like their requested CPU and how much they're actually using and stuff. And I can start to like slice and dice by things like pod name and labels. So I could use that to start figuring out like what are all of the jobs that are running and how many pods are they creating and what's the usage of that stuff. But I could not do that for this. Let's see if this works real quick. Cool. So this query here will hopefully pop up anything that has the label prow.k8s.io job, and it's looking at the integration job. And I don't, oh, hey, look, there we go. There are metrics. So I'm seeing metrics for the integration tests. It looks like what I'm seeing is the utilization of the CPU limit. So most of these things are peaking up super quickly here. Let's change the time scale a bit to like use most of the CPU that they are asking for. Go faster, Google. And then they're scaling back down. So it's a kind of a good way to understand, like, are we actually asking for enough CPU, and then are we taking advantage of the CPU that we're asking for? But what I can't do is understand, like, are things improving over time on the release that we're currently working on? But I should be able to do this now by taunting the demo gods and using base ref and then say that it equals, let's just say master for grins. And now I have filtered this down to all of the integration test jobs that are running against master. So as somebody who likes to create dashboards and pretty graphs and stuff, this is super exciting to me, because now when we make changes that improve the performance of our jobs, it's not going to get mixed in with all of the other jobs that are on older release branches that have not had these changes ported back. I think this was a change that just randomly landed from somebody in OpenShift, and whoever it was, thank you very much. I don't have a live demo of this, but one of the things that bugs me the most is when I like go to test grid and I try to figure out, oh, let's see, I'll go to K8s Infra, I'll pick a random build job that's failed. So like the Canary CSI or whatever, this job, it appears to have failed. I wonder why. I'll click on it. And like, let's just pretend that the failure wasn't the job blatantly doesn't work because there is no cloud build. And it was something that was more transient, that if I just reran this, it could work. Yes, this demo is not working for me live on the fly. Like what I have to do in order to rerun this job is I have to look at the job name. I have to copy paste it. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to click on the prow logo to go to prow.k8s.io. I'm going to click on this box that says search job name. I'm going to paste the job name in there. I'm going to hit enter. and wow, I don't even see the job in here, so I can't even do this. Like normally, let's see if there's another post submit I can look at. How about this? I would then come to like a job like this, and I would click this rerun button, and I would click this rerun button, and that's cool, but I've had to click around like 5 times, and I've had to do a bunch of copy paste and whatnot. And I think it would be so much cooler if I could have done that specifically from the page that's like something failed, and I don't know why. I would like to try again. Sorry I couldn't demo that one live, but I thought that was really cool. The other two, there's no real good demo for, but essentially there are integration tests that run against Proud now that spin up like a whole Proud deployment on a kind cluster, I think, and then run some integration tests against it live. And we're testing Deck out as part of that now, so we can start to make sure that things show up in Deck's UI as it should. And we encountered some sort of racy conditions during failures or interrupts on certain test pods. And so the pod utils thing that just sort of magically makes files upload to GCS when your job finishes, fails, breaks, aborts, whatever, does so a little more reliably and consistently. And then the last two things, like this is mostly Ben, and this is mostly follow up to our KEP around improving Kubernetes build maintenance. Since we no longer use Bazel to run unit tests, we started noticing there are a bunch of unit tests that kind of behave poorly or are not easy to run with just like make test. So we managed to make sure that you no longer have to run unit tests as root in order to get them to pass, which seems like an appropriate thing to do for unit tests. And we also made sure that the unit tests show up on the release blocking dashboard. We kind of lost them ever so briefly. Let's see if I can go find them. Because when we transitioned from Bazel to Make, we also transitioned from seeing unit tests per package, and we started seeing results per test. And it turns out there are like, I don't know, what's the number, Ben? It's like 20,000 unit tests, something like that.
I think it might have even been higher than that. There are a lot.
Yeah, anyway, so I zoom out at all to show this? No, test grid does not take well to zooming out. Anyway, there are a bunch of columns and stuff now, which Safari is rendering poorly for y'all, but I can actually see the exact test cases and stuff for tests that use table-based tests. So you can use all of test grids, you know, options to include by regex, and wow, Safari is really grinding to a halt here. I'm going to stop that.
So yeah, you probably want to close that. This is actually a good future thing for us to work on at some point when, I'm not sure if this is the case now, when test grid is fully migrated to the open source updater. One of us can send a pull request to rewrite the test grid updater to use test cases appropriately mapped to JUnit. Test grid understands hierarchical test cases just like JUnit test suites, but right now each case is a suite. So instead of collapsed, like each package gets a suite and then these are the tests of them, you get a row for every single test case, which is a lot.
That would be awesome. So since I know I didn't have time to cover everything, like I know I missed a lot of stuff that happened. I did not want to name names as far as like who landed everything here, even though I did call myself and Arno and some folks out. But I just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody who has contributed to making Kubernetes easier to contribute to and make it easier to run and write tests and understand what they're doing. So thank you so much for all that you've done. Ben?
I'd like to call out specifically though, since you did call out one person, since you called out me, I'm going to turn around and call out Claudia is in this call, who did a lot of work on the migrating our images, which is in the first point, and Eddie helped with the getting all the tests to actually pass when you run make tests. Sadly, we have one more to fix now, but I swear soon you will be able to run make test on your machine and all the unit tests will actually just pass. You won't need to be root, nothing like that. Eddie fixed the last one for us and then another one stuck in. So thanks for that.
Yes, and thank you for shouting them out. You're right, Claudio. I keep forgetting, like, we're so close to finishing migrating all the CI images, and I can't even begin to fathom the amount of heavy lifting that you have done in getting us to this point. So thanks a bunch, and Eddie, thanks a bunch for the unit test work. It baffles my mind that we've called them unit tests the way they've behaved and what they have required for so long. So it's good to like make them unit again. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm gonna hand it over to Yuvraj to talk about granular improvement.
Hi everyone. I can't share. That's fine. Yeah, in one of the previous meetings, I gave a small demo on support for granular update within the Prow plugin. And okay, yeah, I can share. Awesome.
Yeah, I just made you co-host, so you can share if you need to.
Awesome. Yeah, as I was just saying, in one of the previous SIG testing meetings, I gave a demo on an approve plugin that has granular approval support. So what that means is, instead of doing blanket approvals, you can choose to approve like individual files or a group of files and so on. There were two feedback items that came out of that demo. One was the original demo had used a different plugin altogether called Approve 2 instead of having that logic behind the same Approve plugin. So one of the feedback items was to not have a different plugin called Approve 2, just have it behind Approve, maybe behind a feature flag, so that it's easier to transition. So that is not right now addressed. So now we have something called a granular approval as an option in the Approve plugins configuration. So if that is set to true, your approve plugins behavior will switch to using like acting as a granular approval instead of the standard approve plugin. And the second feedback item that was mentioned was in the approval notifier message, we used to only see like how many files are approved, how many are still pending approval, and then just the owners of the associated unapproved files. One of the feedback items was it would be nice if you can actually see which files are approved and which files are not. So this is an example screenshot of how the new approval message looks like. And as you can see, it shows you like collapsible sections of each of the folders associated with the change set, and shows if you can expand those sections and then see what files are approved and what files are not approved. All the files that are striked out are approved, and the files that are not striked out are not approved. And like this is the same comment, and you can see the folder that's unapproved has no files that are striked out and so on. So with those two feedback, with those two items addressed, I think the PR for the approval plugin is probably ready for review. It was a huge PR, like 7,000 lines or something, but now with one of the plugins configurations gone, it came down to like 5,000 lines, but it's still a very huge PR. Like any feedback on PR and PR reviews would be awesome. And again, start working on them as I receive feedback. And the next items for this is definitely like after all the items are addressed and the PR is reviewed, what would be the rollout strategy? Like how should we roll out this new configuration, new granular approval for the approve plugin, right? So I'm looking for suggestions, but I was thinking maybe like enable it on maybe one repo right now, maybe the test infra repo, and then look to see actual feedback on how people are using it or any other items that need to be addressed, and then start rolling out to more repos. But of course, it's going to be left up to the repo owners if they want to opt in or not. So they can just continue using the old approve plugin if they choose to, but can set the feature flag to true and then start using the new granular approval plugin if they want.
I will opt kind into this immediately, as soon as possible. I guess I need to go review this. I apologize. I'm definitely a bit behind on that of late. I don't know if there's any other grander plan we should have there. Test infra sounds reasonable. I might be, because we've mostly moved to automated deployments, I might be somewhat inclined to suggest that we toggle it first on another repo, so that we don't so that we can continue to avoid backing ourselves in a corner where we have to use like admin powers to fix the repo that runs the infra itself, because we dog food like that. But I think that maybe after just seeing it work at all anywhere else, it probably makes sense to test on test infra. It is still where we usually tested things in the past, and where the right set of people that are likely to fix it will notice how it behaves.
I think I largely agree with that. I think I personally am going to feel a lot more comfortable if Alvaro or Cole or somebody who's deeper into Prow than I am can review it from just kind of a like token consumption perspective, performance perspective. They understand the operational characteristics of Prow a lot better than I do. I can definitely help with the rollout thing. I think what Ben is talking about sounds great. Like kind as a repo sounds cool. Test infra as a high traffic repo that has a variety of SIGs contributing sounds cool. I think Kubernetes community would be the final repo I would want to see before I considered throwing it at Kubernetes or enabling it org-wide.
We should. I didn't anyone. Can you repeat that, Aaron, so we can take that down as a note? And then as soon as you finish that, Eddie has his hand up.
I saw Eddie's hand go up. So I was just saying, I think kind first, in terms of rolling out to repos, kind first sounds cool. Test infra second sounds cool. And Kubernetes community is the third, which sounds like a useful cross-section to me. And then I guess I'm uncertain whether I would want to look at like enabling it org-wide or just enabling it specifically for Kubernetes. But before rolling it out, I would want to make sure that Cole or Alvaro or somebody else who's more familiar with the operational characteristics of Prow than I am takes a good look at it. But I really appreciate you iterating on the feedback, and the screenshot you provided looks, and the demo you just did looks cool. Having said those words, Eddie has his hand up.
Just Yuvraj, is it okay if I start asking you a bunch of questions about your development process and cycle for working on this? Because I just started working on 2 different Prow plugins, and I've been wondering how I'm going to test and get this to work like you did. So
yeah, sure.
Awesome, thank you.
I think that, I don't know if you have any you want to ask live here, if you'd rather take it offline, because I think it'd be, I think those are questions a bunch of people have, honestly.
So for context, the first one I started working on was a Prow plugin to transfer GitHub issues between repos, because we want to start moving all the kube control issues out of the main Kubernetes repo to the kube control repo to make it easier to triage. So I started working on that, and I got very intimate with the Prow GitHub client and learned how to do GraphQL mutations, because that is the only API that is supported for transferring issues. So I have finally finished adding mutation support to that client, and I added my mutation API request. And so I have a client now that can transfer GitHub issues, which makes me very happy. And I have just started trying to look at the Prow plugin SDK and infrastructure. So yeah, I guess the question is, do I need to spin up my own Prow cluster to like dev against? Like, I imagine I can get kind of far with some unit tests, but I'd love to know more about your experience there.
Yeah, so unit tests definitely help for like small tests, but I did actually set up a dev Prow instance and like a test org and a test repo, and I made all my, I did all my testing against that. Like, for example, I have like a prov testing org and a test one repo in it. And my prov, I have a prov cluster running on GCP, and that has been configured to interact with this org. And I use this as my playground to test all the work I did.
And how did you deploy your Prow infrastructure? We don't have a Helm chart or anything, right? Is it just like manifests or?
There is a doc somewhere in GitHub. I can find that for you, which step-by-step instructs how you can set up your own Prow instance on GCP. And I just followed that. After that, it's just like configuring the deployments to use your own source code so that it compiles from that. And from there, I was able to test it.
Is that something that would be beneficial to the rest of the org if we had a Prow dev somewhere that we could playground against?
I don't know how beneficial it will be if multiple people are working on the same plugin against the same prov. That could potentially have issues. So it depends.
Oh God, yes. I also have my own org called Bashfire that I also stood up my own personal Prow against. Like, I think the model that Yuvraj is describing is what I know most of the folks I know that work on Prow use. Like, I think there might be like a shared org that some of them use. I know Eric Feda has the Fediverse org and does a bunch of stuff against that. But like, as much as you can integration test and unit test and like run Prow on kind and do stuff that way, eventually you run into the delta between what GitHub's docs say the API does and what the API actually does live. And there's just, I have seen no effective substitute for having a GitHub org and some repos and like a sock puppet user or two, or some friends who are willing to help you out and play against Prow deployed against that. I see Ben.
I do think we can actually improve this a bit for folks here, but I think that like totally shared one, it has other problems. Like, you need to give it a GitHub token. We probably don't want to have like an official GitHub token that people can effectively take arbitrary commands with, or that sort of thing. You could run pretty much all of this. I think that probably the biggest blocker for people running this themselves is that you do need a public endpoint, because of like plugins in particular webhook based. I think we can either improve on helping people replay webhooks that we know are real, or like pointing to one of the options for something like inlets that lets you have like a public endpoint on ingress on a cluster that isn't necessarily like cloud hosted in public. I also think Aaron knows about this. We should probably surface to people working on things like Prow the GitHub or the Kubernetes test instance endpoint. There's an extremely useful like side tool of Kubernetes that allows you to browse the webhooks coming into our projects, and it summarizes them quite a bit, but it also gives you like the raw webhooks, so you can go back and see like historical webhooks from our real instance, but it's kind of hidden.
It is kind of hidden, and I want to kill that App Engine app with fire. I would.
But we could maybe just keep that part of the app.
We could perhaps ask
that part of the app and its data are both really
yeah, for sure. The other thing I was going to share is GitHub actually exposes this via an API now. I don't know how much, like what the Kubernetes thing is convenient for is, I think, I forget what level of auth we have the webhook stuff hidden behind is my thing. I don't know if it's like a public endpoint that literally anybody can hit to see all the webhooks that have been sent to us, or if there is some level of auth against your email address or which team you're a member of. Ben is shaking his head, no, no, no. But like, honestly, I just like, I would rather get out of the business of managing stuff that's not running on Kubernetes, essentially. So if there's a way we could, I'd love to preserve the backing store or find a way to migrate it to something more sustainable, but it is available for now as a tool. I just,
well,
yeah.
I think that's an ask we could put out is for someone to, I don't know that you would even really need, like, for example, app engine access to do this. It's the APIs for the data store are really, really simple. It would probably mostly be writing the code to put it into some other, probably more complex data store across projects.
Yeah, so that answers some of your questions. I also am open to the idea with my GitHub management team hat on. Like, I don't know if it has to be an official Kubernetes org or anything, but I think it'd be, since there are a number of people who have a variety of playground orgs, I don't know if there's benefit in just having like one playground org for proud developers to play against so that we're all trying stuff, or if it would turn into a crazy bot fight with multiple different prow bots trying to manage multiple different repos at the same time.
It's also for a lot of the plugins, it would be a bit of a permissions issue.
That's fair.
Because they take direct action on the repo with write permission, which we probably don't want to be granting all over the place, even in the playground, just because of official association and people on the internet mispave.
I'll stop talking in case Eddie has more questions. I want to time box us to like 4 more minutes or so.
No, that's super useful. I think I have enough to get started. I was hoping I didn't have to stand up my own Prow instance, but it sounds like I'm going to have to. So
it's been a while since I ran through the page that I linked in chat. There's a getting started guide. And at the time, I did remember it being a little kind of like bootstrappy. I kind of had to like get a primitive version stood up and then something slightly more advanced. I think it's gotten a lot better, especially like with your own dummy organ stuff. Prow can sort of automatically manage its webhooks and its tokens a lot more nicely than it used to be able to. I don't know, maybe Yuvraj has a more recent onboarding experience with standing up Prow, but it is documented. I'll say that much.
Yeah, it is documented, and I followed that dog just line by line, and it helped. Although I would say that that dog has 2 sections in it. One is called the tackle deployment, which is supposed to do it all for you, and the other is the manual. The tackle didn't work for me. I had to do it everything manually one by one.
Yeah, and the other thing is the tackle one is like GCP specific. It takes advantage of just like create a GK cluster and then like grab the kube configs from the clusters, that sort of thing, to set up the like job scheduling credentials and that sort of thing. It's not, tackle is not like generalized, and I'm not sure how doable that is.
do you have a link to that App Engine app with the webhook debug info and all that?
Let me see if I can find the issue where I linked it. I will dig it up and I will post it on Slack, or maybe Ben can come up with it faster than I can.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I've. It's actually in the README for Kubernetes.
README, the last place I would look for useful information. Okay, with our remaining 15 minutes, I thought I'd try.
Except
I kind of rambled Ben.
Sorry.
Okay. Also, hopefully the noise canceling is working because there's a lawnmower or some kind of industrial strength shredder going on outside. I rambled a bunch last time about some of the potential things we could work on for 123. I kind of wanted to open the floor and ask y'all, like, what are you interested in accomplishing over the next 4 months, 3 months-ish. You know, like historically, we used to think in terms of quarters because Kubernetes releases were released quarterly. And for some of us, it lines up well with internal planning and scheduling and whatnot. But I found it easier to tie to the Kubernetes release life cycle because that helps us plan around what are changes that we can do like right now before the release cycle kind of really starts up. And then what are changes that we really want to land before like code freeze starts to roll around, things of that nature. So I'll just kind of open the floor and see if anybody has big plans for 123. Or small plans. Small fun plans are cool too.
Well, the two plans that I have the one plugin I'm working to transfer issues, and then I'd like to do one for, I want to change the release notes plugin to be able to modify the top level comment. So I want to add a release note instead of having to ask someone before I approve, like, hey, could you please add a release note?
That would be amazing.
So I figured if I was going to learn Prow, I should take on other Prow things.
Yeah, those sound super cool. The release notes plugin one is kind of near and dear to my heart just because the ability to edit issue descriptions for the express purpose of release notes is kind of the remaining major reason that we still have so many people who have direct write access to the Kubernetes repo. And I wish it weren't that way, but.
Also prodding labels because the various plugins that like miss a webhook.
Well, like, yes, today I didn't have to do it against Kubernetes. I did it against Test Infra, but today when GitHub was not being very happy, it was really convenient that I could manually add the labels when the / commands didn't work. But generally, like, the / commands are great for the labels. There are some labels that we specifically don't have command support for as that extra barrier of only certain people should be authorized to add, excuse me, or remove these labels. And like Cole Wagner had an idea kicking around a year or two ago, maybe it was longer than that, about creating like a generalized plugin framework where we could tie authorization for different commands to like the team membership of people. So like that exists today for the Milestone plugin, which is how the whole Milestone maintainers team came to be. And there are configuration things that like other repos have other teams hard-coded by their numeric ID that are authorized to use that. But what would be super cool is to kind of like pull that back and turn it into, this is a plugin and these are the commands that are authorized to this GitHub team, and do it kind of like by the, I think it's called the slug or something, where it's like the org name and the team name. It's a far more readable way of doing it. And it would be cool if that was just something that was freely available to all plugins versus hard-coded in one. But now I also want Pony and a Rainbow too. So I have like a bunch of open dream stuff, kind of like that, about making our infrastructure a little bit easier to use. I see somebody, I'm gonna guess it's Arnaud, added something to the meeting notes about a transition plan for prow.cadence.io. I can talk about that for a little bit.
I just want to add super quickly that as opposed to the release notes one, I actually think the issue migration one is also going to be very well received. Besides something like moving issues from one repo to the other because you're moving repos, I see pretty often with like documentation issues that should have been in the website repo, and right now, very few people can actually move them. And there's a lot of like close the original issue, file the exact same issue. If we could just move those easily, that would be really helpful.
So prow migration. I'm not sure that I have anything to say that I haven't said before, because I haven't written anything new down. But basically, if I want to dream real big, I have this open dream of having like prow.k8s.io point to a prow instance that's running over in K8s infraland. And I want it to be the prow instance that Arnaud has been working to stand up, which we're calling K8s infra prow right now. And our plan looks something like, we want to stand up this K8s infra prow thing, and we want to use it to fully manage the Kubernetes /K8s.io repo. And then when we feel confident that like we got it operational, and it's able to look at all the things, then we could look at like expanding it to other repos potentially, or we could continue to iterate on it for like, hey, let's get more people than like Arnaud and myself to understand what this thing is, how it works, how it can break, how to fix it when it breaks, and create something that looks a little more like a playbook for people to support it. Best effort, pingable via some kind of on-call alias or something. The other option, and so then it kind of looks like, do we look at like migrating things over to this new instance, or do we attempt to shut it all down, pick up the prow instance that's currently running over in google.com, redeploy it all over in K8s infraland, and flip DNS, and suddenly that prow instance is prow.k8s.io, and it is running all of the jobs that prow.k8s.io runs right now. That's the like maybe riskier approach. I think it's the approach that people will also look to and be like, why are we spending all this time doing migration and zero downtime stuff when we could just flip a switch? And I think like somebody from OpenShift said they tried this and it was about a 2 or 3 day tire fire. And maybe if the project is willing to tolerate a 2 or 3 day tire fire, we could give that a shot. But I think we need to spend some time enumerating the risks. Like, but if I just like bottom line, I think somewhere in the middle ground there, I would love to say that Kubernetes, the repo that receives by far and away the largest amount of traffic and triggers the largest amount of jobs and is the thing that does the most spend, like that ought to be, those jobs ought to be handled by a control plane that is under community management.
I think the odds are pretty high that in any migration where you stop using a prow to control a repo and you move to another prow, there's going to be some hiccups. So I think it's better to just go ahead and plan it as a hard cut over with a known, like we're going to have a window where maybe things are interrupted. Let's try to avoid like code freeze. But I think before that, I don't think we should be talking about doing that when we haven't moved to things that don't remotely require that. All of the periodics and post submits for nearly all repos, unless we have reporting post submits enabled somewhere I don't know about, can be moved between prows with no real interruption. And that will help us make sure that we've built up capacity and remaining quirks around permissions around things. And
they can, but so that brings me to the other point. Those are all the technical reasons. I don't know, maybe that's, there's some technical blockers. I have a policy blocker too. And the policy blocker is, we got to find some way of actually budgeting like what we're spending our CI, like in terms of CI costs. We need to better understand what we're spending our money on and why. Because right now what happens is money that is spent for CI is spent in 2 places. It's either spent running pods on a Kubernetes cluster, or it is spent spinning up external clusters. potentially via hosted service, hopefully not. Most of them are like spinning up VMs and then running stuff on those VMs and then pointing tests at that external thing. And right now, we're using Boscos to manage a pool of GCP projects, and the cost of like which project is being used by which SIG for which job is impossible to really correlate, especially when it comes to billing. We got a real quick taste of this with scalability costs, because right now the 5K node scalability jobs are pinned to a single project. And so as we've been canarying jobs over for Kate's Infra, like we noticed, hey, there's this one GCP project that is got a lot more spend than usual. So we were able to identify that cost. So it could be that we do something like, make a bunch of Boscos pools and shard out projects that way. But like, we kind of need that broader policy discussion of like, so how are we going to kind of budget and enforce budgeting?
I kind of don't think that discussion should block the migration of what we're doing today.
It should, if we're going to run out of money before we have finished migrating. Like, I need to prioritize spending money on the things that are most important to the project. And right now, I just have this sneaking suspicion that if I were to copy paste all jobs that run on proud.kates.io, not all of those are relevant to Kubernetes, and not all of those provide meaningful signal. And I anticipate that that is more money than the community is willing to be more capable of spending.
But we wouldn't be doing that because the jobs that aren't relevant aren't in the org.
I'm sorry, I'm just want to quickly step up before we finish and bring some attention to information to Ben. So basically, I add that item because I don't think we should try to figure out now how we want to do the migration, but basically identify what are the blockers for the migration, because I know for some I basically integrate with internal Google tools. Or basically recently I realized I think tech need to talk to basically a test grade bucket inside Google. So why I'm adding this is basically I would like to basically get a list of blockers from on the Google side, so we can basically identify what's the maintenance windows to do that if we decide to do a flip and switch, or how we do the transition. The problem is either me or Aaron can easily identify what are the blockers for that migration, because we are not on the operation side of pro.kates.io. So my basically request is basically maybe during 123, try to identify the global list of the blockers so we can build a transition plan. It's basically investigation and some kind of documentation.
Yeah, I'm super on board with that. I think like the staging instance that you stood up has been all about, or whatever the Kate's Infra Pro instance has been all about, a kind of a fact-finding mission for like, what are all of the credentials and dependencies that are necessary to get something stood up, and which of these can we, copy paste or replicate over to community infrastructure? What stuff can we not do that for? To identify those dependencies. I think maybe, yeah, I'm leapfrogging ahead to, assume we got all that worked out, then like policy-wise, like, are we okay? I think there's also the do we have people who can run and support it the way that we currently have people who run and support proud.kates.io, right? There is a team of Googlers. They run it a certain way that has parity with a number of other Prow instances that they manage. Do we maintain that parity? Do we change it at all? So I like, my scenario, my ideal vision, I guess, is like at a future meeting, we get representatives from Test Infra on call here, and we walk through a document that describes, you know, what on call is and how it is done, and we make sure that it's still doable with Prow over at Kubernetes.io. So it's like it's a similar list of blockers, I think, that you're talking about, Arno. And I would totally push hard for that to be next week. I'm happy for it to be next meeting, but I am going to be on a beach, definitely not in this meeting 2 weeks from now. So if y'all want to have that conversation without me, that'd be super cool. If it's a conversation that I need to drive, it'll have to be at least 2 meetings from now. That is our time. Yeah, September sounds kind of useful, but I agree with, like, I super want to understand, like, I want to have this happen well before code freeze. I want us to have enough time to like flip, have some time with it operationally, and then if we need to flip back, do that well in advance of all of the usual capacity fun that we encounter as we get closer to code freeze and stuff. I don't enjoy having to chase our tails over too many things changing at once. So, okay. Thank you all for showing up today. It was super cool to see everybody. Thanks a bunch for all that you do. Thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing a recording of you all at this meeting in 2 weeks' time and seeing you all online. All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.